On March 13th, 1964, a young woman named Catherine Kitty Genovese came home to her New York apartment building at 3:15 in the morning following her shift as a bar manager. She parked her car in a lot about 100 feet from the entrance to her door. It had to walk through an alley to enter into her door. She walked to her building. An unidentified man approached her. Scared, she started to run and to scream. She ran across the parking lot towards the front of her building, yet the man quickly caught up to her and stabbed her twice in the back. A victim of a violent crime, she was murdered that night. Sadly, as she cried for help, some of her neighbors and other building tenants, some reports even suggest 38 of them, heard her, explained the screams away, and did nothing to protect, to aid, or to save her from the brutality. Immediately, it was easy to wonder how this happened. Yet social psychologists, following this case, have found that many individuals choose not to intrude, not to call for help, and not to get the victim out of harm's way when witnessing a crime or wrongdoing. According to the studies, a bystander's lack of interference occurs mainly for two reasons. One, typically bystanders note others' reactions and pick up behavior cues when faced with an emergency situation. If everyone else is doing nothing, an individual rationalizes from others' unresponsiveness, aid is not necessary. Number two, known as the diffusion of responsibility, it occurs when onlookers all assume that someone else will interfere, thus deflecting the responsibility and feeling less inclined to act. Furthermore, the results seem to show that an understanding of social norms, personal values, and moral responsibility by the individual does not imply that one will actually act on them. We learned and we watched this unfold this past week with the revelations surrounding the Penn State University. It is a situation that tests one's moral fabric and one's responsibility to act no matter the circumstance. A former assistant football coach for the school was arrested for sexually abusing children. 2 university officials were taken into custody for trying to cover up an egregious act that occurred on campus reported by a then graduate assistant. A legendary coach, who while not legally accountable, was fired, and I believe rightly so, for not standing up for a victim when it truly mattered. And then over 2,000 students rioted in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, following the announcement that their coach would be let go immediately, who seemed to be worried more about football and legacies rather than the countless victims whose years of physical and mental abuse could maybe have been prevented. In the aftermath of these charges, when it comes to child abuse, domestic abuse, rape, or other violent crimes against innocent victims, how does silence ever trump speaking out? I understand that confronting this topic might be difficult for some to hear. The matter for some might be too explicit, and the subject for others might make one feel uncomfortable. Yet the magnitude of the case at Penn State expresses fully the reality that all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Moreover, the inaction and silence by those at Penn State is a microcosm of indifference, apathy, and silence, which not only afflicts our world, but also allows evil, injustice, and oppression to continually happen. Rabbi Joachim Prinz, who was a rabbi in Berlin in the 1930s and immigrated to the United States from Germany in 1937, expressed this problem of silence in his speech at the March on Washington immediately before Martin Luther King Jr. gave his rousing words about having a dream. He stated, "The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. A great people, which had created a great civilization, had become a nation of silent onlookers. They remain silent in the face of hate, in the face of brutality. America must not become a nation of onlookers. America must not remain silent." Prince's words are extremely powerful and acknowledge our responsibility, our ability to respond. It's sadly, however, when victims or whistleblowers reveal tragic stories, many turn a blind eye, or more disturbingly, ostracize them. Family, friends, and strangers sometimes might tell them that they were mistaken, somehow responsible, or urged to keep quiet for fear of bringing shame and embarrassment to a family. Our Torah portion this week is Vayera, and found within it is one of the most troubling stories in our entire Torah. Two angels arrived to Sodom, and Lot, Abraham's brother, saw them. He immediately invited them to stay with him. The men of Sodom, the men and boys, came to Lot's house and exclaimed in Hebrew, "Ayeh ha'anashim asher ba'u elecha halayla hotse'em elenu v'ned'a otam." Where are those men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, so we may have our way with them. While Lot spoke out against this heinous crime and said that it wasn't acceptable, his comments following will baffle the modern mind. He cried to the perpetrators, "Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do as you please. But please do not do anything to these men, since they have come under the shelter of my roof." This is very disturbing and an embarrassing passage. For while the city of Sodom is destroyed because of its wicked ways, there is no resolution for Lot's complete disregard of his daughter's well-being. Over time, our rabbis in our tradition could have removed these inappropriate acts or permitted communities to skip it. Yet every year, on this weekend, we are forced to confront these disturbing events committed by Lot. While some might read this inappropriately as approving Lot's actions, its inclusion provides us a lesson in becoming an advocate for those innocent victims who desperately need their voices heard. The brutal details left for us in this week's Torah portion highlight our ability to respond and the need to subsequently take action when we are confronted with very disturbing, very complex, and very distressing issues that confront us. Our rabbis realized that in order to strengthen a community and root out the inhumanities in our world, it is imperative to not hide alarming details found within the tradition. Instead, we are obliged to face them, to criticize them, and to take action to ensure that the atrocities do not happen again. In response to our troubling passage this week, and in the wake of the charges at Penn State, our rabbis charged us to speak out, to act on behalf of the blameless that might not ask for it, but most certainly need our help. While this week's Torah portion includes a very distressing passage, it also, for the first time in our entire Torah, mentions the word Hineni. When God called to Abraham to test his strength of character, Abraham, with this simple word meaning, "Here I am," he responded. As we move forward from this evening, we will each confront a situation in which someone will need our help. Will need us to stand up for them, and will need us to act on their behalf. I cannot tell you when that time will be, but I can tell you that time will come. It could be tonight, could be next week, could be next year. And at that moment, history shows us that being neutral never works. And my hope for each of us, with relentless compassion, I hope we have the courage to say, Hineni, here I am.